You're listening to the Geek Watch Podcast, Episode 57, Alita Battle Angel.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to Episode 57 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
We've got a lot to talk about today. Movies, there's a lot of movie news, things that are leaving television, things that are coming to television. I did get a chance to see Alita Battle Angel. We can talk about that. Mm-hmm. We can talk about last week's episode of The Walking Dead. But before we get to that, since I brought it up last week, I'm going to have to bring it up again this week. The Wonder Twins. Because the Wonder Twins wound up making the news because there was a preview issue of the Wonder Twins released, and it was released to some bit of controversy.
Oh, no.
Well, Geek Watchers might remember from what we talked about last week. The Wonder Twins are on Earth. They are sort of like junior members of the Justice League, but they also go to high school because they're of that age, they need to be going to school, and since they're on Earth, they go to high school. And the moment that brought up all the controversy was there was some panels where Zan was standing in front of the class, and the teacher had asked him to talk about life on his planet and what it was like being an Exorian. He was talking about certain things, but he decided to bring up the fact that when a thunderstorm happens, Exorians have a certain reaction to it. And something that he refers to as thunderlust.
Okay.
Apparently, when Exorians hear thunder, the first thing that pops into their head is, hey, let's take our clothes off.
Huh.
And get busy. Now,
Guess like Barry White to humans? I don't know.
Well, yes, but keep in mind, there's a bit of a twist to this, which is, of course, Exorians have certain powers, which is they shapeshift. They all shapeshift. And apparently, not only are Exorian males able to form into liquid, they're apparently very gender fluid as well.
Huh.
So they very often change sex.
Okay.
And the females take on animal aspects, and then it's just one big orgy.
Okay.
And so
was the orgy the problem, or was the transgenderism the problem?
I think that the orgy was the problem.
Oh,
I think
okay.
that the transgenderism thing was a problem. I think the bestiality was the problem. There was a lot of problems that people had. I saw the panels. It wasn't graphic, but I can understand why some people of a certain persuasion might not be cool with this at all, especially when they say, hey, come on, you can't be talking about sex to teenagers, and you certainly can't be talking about crazy sex to teenagers. Although, I am going to say this. I remember when I was a teenager, I wasn't ignorant about sex.
No.
In fact, I grew up in an era where there were R-rated sex comedies made for teenagers. And of course, you can't get away with that nowadays. But I grew up being able at 15, 16 to go to an R-rated movie that was basically, a sex comedy that was geared to people my age.
Huh.
Movies like Porky's and other things like that. That really wasn't geared to adults. It was for younger people, definitely. I mean, I understand parents wanting to monitor what their kids get into, but at the same time, if you think that teenagers don't know about sex, you may be a little bit naive.
Well, my thoughts on it are, again, everyone's talking about everything's changing, everything's radical. This is not new. In The Magic Land of Oz, L. Frank Baum, 100-year-old book, there's a character that changes genders, so that's not new. In 1992, Beauty and the Beast, a woman having a love affair with an animal. Then in Twilight. So if you're going to be okay with your children reading Twilight and being okay with that, but then get upset because a comic book does the same thing, it's kind of hypocritical, I feel. I mean, these aren't new ideas. They're just presented in a different way. So, don't pick and choose what you're going to be angry about.
Well, that's true. I think that a lot of people get the idea, a lot of older people get the idea that the internet is basically bringing a lot of the stuff out that because of the internet and all of this, kids are more sexualized now than they ever was. And I have to say, that's not the case. I think it shows us more of what was already there, but it didn't add to it. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, for me, one of the biggest shocks that came to me was when I was first starting out as a writer, and the first writing convention I ever went to was the World Horror Convention. It was back in 1995. I was in New York City. And I sat in on a panel about YA and teen writing and novels and that sort of thing. And I was shocked to find out how the type of literature that is geared to young adults, and because I was still of the mind, it's like, if it's a teenager, you have to heavily edit the type of stuff that you put out there. But I found out, no, that's not the case at all. In books geared to young adults, and now they have they call new adults. But the only real guideline to those books is the characters tend to be the same age of the people that are reading. But you can't write a teenager who's never heard of sex before because there's not a lot of them around there. Unless you're writing about some sort of cloistered situation. For the most part, not only do teenagers know about sex, but they think about it a lot.
Well, and teenagers were always aware of sex. I think now we are much more aware of the consequences of sex than we ever were. I've heard older generations just get so upset about things like, 16 and pregnant, and they do not believe me when I tell them that those shows have led to a decrease in teen pregnancies. And they will not believe me when I tell them that there were more pregnant girls when you were in high school than there were when I was in high school, just because we talked about it when I was in high school. When you were in high school, a girl went abroad for a semester.
Right.
Or she went and spent the summer with her aunt, and then, she came back, and there's a whole generation, and they're on, social media now trying to find their mothers, these teen girls that were not really given a choice. You are a teenage girl who got pregnant, you have to give up your baby. That's what's best for the baby. And you're unwed. No, they really weren't given a choice. And so their babies were given up for adoption. And they're all over the internet now trying to find their mothers. And all the mothers pretty much say the same thing. I wasn't given a choice. I had to give you up.
Right. I think under the circumstances, maybe the internet has given younger people access to more information, but I don't think that's a bad thing because I think ultimately it makes them smarter.
Absolutely.
It allows them to make smarter decisions. And like I said, when I heard about the controversy, I looked at the panels. I mean, to me, if this were my kids, I don't think that it would be that big a deal to me. I could see why maybe to some parents it might be, but I think this is a tempest in a teacup. To be on. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, the Wonder Twins, like I mentioned before, we had talked about it last week. And I was going over the final edit, listening to this, and I got to the part where we were talking about how the Wonder Twin powers are activated.
Right.
And as I was listening, I said to myself, did I just mansplain to Mandy how the Wonder Twins work? Did I do that? I'm like, and I started to question myself. I jump in. It's like, no, Mandy, that's not how the Wonder Twin powers work.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I mansplained to her, didn't I? And I was starting to doubt whether or not I was right about the whole thing. And so I started to look it up, and I found something interesting. And this is kind of why I brought it up. Number one, I have to say I am very sensitive to the whole mansplaining thing, because very often what I do is when we're talking about something, I'll bring it up and talk about explanations and explaining things for the Geek Watchers out there that might not know what I'm talking about. And I'm very careful. I don't want it to make it sound like I'm telling you, Mandy, something obviously that you should. I try to be very careful to indicate when I'm explaining something to the audience, and instead of turning around and trying to mansplain it to you. That's not what I started to look things up, and yes, the Wonder Twins did use hand-to-hand contact, although later on in the series, it got really lazy and didn't even bother to have them take their gloves off. But I noticed something else also, and this is the reason I'm bringing this up. I also noticed that when you do a Google search, you know how they do the autocomplete, where they try to figure out what you're searching for? The third option in that search was Wonder Twins rings. So wait a minute. Okay, well, they didn't use rings, but people looked it up. And I also noticed that on Family Guy, they did a sketch that involved Peter being one of the Wonder Twins, and they used rings to change. And I thought...
So this is a common misconception, kind of like
the
Luke...
the Mandela Effect.
Like, I think, Luke, I am your father. Yeah.
So it looks like we've discovered another Mandela Effect. Some people... That's where the rings came from, because I'm thinking in my head, and what confused me was, I was thinking, didn't they, maybe they did have yellow rings. I remember them maybe on those... And it's like, no, But
I really thought there were rings. I did. But I think I'm from that other universe too, because I can remember the Sinbad Genie movie. I can remember the commercials for it on Nickelodeon because it was a made-for-Nickelodeon movie. It wasn't out in the theaters. And then the Kazam movie came out in the theaters. So I can remember that happening.
Yeah, I think this is another Mandela Effect, and maybe we just stumbled onto that.
Yeah, we need to go on Reddit. Is it Reddit that does the Mandela Effect, or is it Creepypasta?
I think there is a subreddit that deals with the Mandela Effect.
And Glitch in the Matrix is...
Glitches in the Matrix. I love
Glitch in the Matrix.
Oh, yeah. So I just thought that was really interesting that we may have inadvertently stumbled into another Mandela Effect. So maybe in another universe they do, in fact. Yeah,
absolutely. Listeners, make some comments. Send us your stories. Tell us if you think the Wonder Twins used rings.
There you go.
And it just, I can really picture it in my head. Their rings coming together and saying Wonder Twin powers activate when they matched up. I don't know why I think that.
Well, that's weird because when I was starting to think about it, I was like, wait a minute, I think I was wrong because I think I'm starting to remember rings now. So I'm kind of stuck in remembering that there were rings and then remembering that it was, they took their gloves off.
Just fist bump.
Yeah, and fist bump. So, yeah, there you go. Also, last weekend was the New York Toy Fair. And I was looking at a bunch of stuff that was coming out. The two things that I remember mostly from the Toy Fair, first of all, there was a toy that is a Ghostbusters Transformers crossover. It is an Ecto-1 that is a Transformer. You can turn it into a robot. So this toy, of course, is made only for Kevin Pauly, but sometimes you just make something for one person and other people like it. So that was definitely the Kevin Pauly toy.
Absolutely.
Our friend Kevin Pauly, who's very much into Ghostbusters and the Transformers.
And your partner in
The Real Deal.
Real Deal, yes.
Yes.
That reviews movies.
Yeah, and I also, the other thing that there was like a ton of stuff. We could do an entire podcast on this. But the other thing that I remember that was kind of neat, Mattel, they were coming out with some new He-Man figures. What was really interesting about them is the He-Man characters that were in the movie. So you've got a Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, you've got Franklin Jella in his full regalia.
Do you have a Courtney Cox?
I don't know if they did it.
Oh my gosh.
I remember seeing 3 of them. I saw those 2. I'm assuming Evelyn is going to be there. But the guy with the mutt face and the pulled back hair and the hook for a hand, he was one of the figures.
Are they holding that shiny thing with the buttons that sings to you to open up the magic portal?
I'm sure Gweldor has got to be one of those figures. And
as we've talked about, Brian, in the 80s, that was how you did movies in the 80s, is you had this really, cool universe until the budget ran out. And then you went through a portal into modern day.
Right.
Usually modern day, like LA or New York.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely so.
He-Man, Masters of the Universe, was not alone. This is a fairly common trope in the 80s.
Definitely so. But I do have to say that when you looking at a lot of the stuff that was coming out of the New York Toy Fair, one thing that really surprised me, well, I have to say that I was very struck by the fact that a lot of toys aren't really for kids.
Nope.
There's a lot of adult, well, I don't want to say adult toys because that's a totally different thing. And we're not going to talk about that. But there's a lot of things put there that
collectibles, Brian.
There you go. Collectibles. Now, which makes me, at one point, I have to say, I do wonder a little bit what Bill Maher would have to say about that, of toys, made for adults. Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding. Nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody really cares.
Mm-hmm. Although it's multi-bazillion dollar business.
Yeah.
But, hey, it's for kids or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Toys for adulting. There you go. I saw an article the other day that shocked the heck out of me because this is a deep cut to my childhood. In fact, this is such a deep cut to my childhood, I'm pretty sure even you don't know about this. Okay. But there was a TV show that I watched years ago called The Banana Splits. Do you know anything about The Banana Splits?
I remember bananas in pajamas.
Oh, this is way before this. This is the show started back in 1969. I was 2 years old at the time. I remember seeing clips of The Banana Splits during Mr. Cartoon when I was, single digit age. Mm-hmm. That's how far back this goes. And they were 4 mascot characters, live action mascotted characters. And they got into adventures and things like that.
Was it like a Sid and Marty Krofft?
Sid and Marty Krofft actually designed the costumes for the Banana Splits before they struck out on their own and started HR puffing stuff and that sort of thing.
Okay, because that's what when I think of mascot costumes, I think of Sid and Marty Krofft. And when I think of puppets, I think of Jim Henson. And,
right, exactly. But yeah, Sid and Marty Krofft actually designed the mascot costume.
Okay.
But here's the thing. The Banana Splits are getting a new movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's not the weird part.
All right.
Basically, this movie is about a kid and his family who go to see a taping of the Banana Splits, and terrible, horrible things start to happen, and people start to die.
Oh.
It is a Banana Splits horror movie.
Huh.
This is like the weirdest thing ever.
Okay, why didn't they do that with Scooby-Doo?
I don't know. I mean, it would sound like it would make... That's the thing. This is such a strange contradiction, because, of course, the Banana Splits kids... TV show, really kind of wacky, straightforward type of a thing, and then they're going to make a horror movie out of this. This is the weirdest contradiction of a plot that I could possibly imagine. I'm really curious about how this is going to turn out, because it just seems so weird. So, but yeah, that's going to be a movie sometime, and I guess we will definitely check that out. Speaking of movies, let's talk a little bit of movie news that's just come out. Gwyneth Paltrow, in an interview, announced that Endgame's going to be her last Marvel movie, and she's going to be retiring as Pepper Potts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, now what she said was she figures she's getting a little old to keep playing the role, which to me sounds ridiculous. But, and she did say she would be willing to come back if they need her for a cameo or whatever. So, unless she's like completely swerving us, which is very possible, I guess that means she's not going to die in Endgame. There's a lot of rumors saying that she's going to have a lot to do in Endgame.
Okay.
And
so they're all flashbacks from now on.
Well, that may be true. The other thing, too, is that, and we talked about this when the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer came out, on the big check, you've got Pepper Potts' signature on it. So... Like I said, unless they're completely swerving us, she's not going to die in Endgame, but we may not be seeing her anymore. But of course, we could be losing a lot of characters in Endgame. So we don't know for sure, but I guess we will find out. Speaking of losing characters, let's go to television for a moment. It was announced this week. They have canceled Punisher and Jessica Jones.
Yeah, but, it really wasn't that much of a surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a disappointment, but I saw it coming, so...
Yeah, Jessica Jones still has a third season coming out, and I guess once it's done, that's it. Now, I know Jeff Loeb wrote a letter saying that I've not seen the last of the Defenders, so there's a possibility that maybe it'll come up on Hulu. But especially with the Netflix contracts, we may be waiting 2 years for contracts to expire before they would be able to do new ones. So, just like you said, I mean, we all knew this was going to happen. They were killing off these series left and right. It was just a matter of time. I think they waited to announce Punisher and Jessica Jones because Punisher was coming out with a season and Jessica Jones was coming out with a season, and they were going to wait until they were ready to release those before they announced the whole thing. So that's it. We may be losing some shows, but we're gaining some. You were talking about how impressed you were with the Doom Patrol trailer.
Yeah, I watched that, and it felt so Hellboy-like. And first thing I thought, wow, Timothy Dalton, he's our new John Hurt. And, bringing this team together, he's like the the Gandalf, the mage character in this.
Oh, yeah, the mentor character, definitely. Yeah, and today they just released a new Twilight Zone trailer.
Did they? I missed it.
Yeah, well, you'll definitely have to check it out. It's not a teaser. You get to see clips from a lot of the episodes that will be coming out. And boy, does it feel like the Twilight Zone. I cannot wait. So it's going to be coming out April the 1st, streaming on the CBS All Access. And I didn't think I could be more excited about it, but I certainly am now at this point. Also coming out, they just announced this. Back in 1987, the BBC had a television show called The Storyteller.
Yes.
And since you mentioned John Hurt, of course, John Hurt played the Storyteller.
Right.
So...
It was a Jim Henson, and they had all the puppets. And pretty much all the fairy tales that didn't get the Disney treatment ended up on the Storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
Some really cool ones. Sap Sorrow and All Kinds of Fur and some great, great stories on there.
Well, it looks like the Henson Company will be bringing back the Storyteller.
Oh, that is awesome.
And Neil Gaiman is going to be helping them with that. He's going to be writing. Of course, John Hurt can't come back as the storyteller, but one thing they did talk about is, along with telling stories, they want to go into the storyteller's backstory. They want to explore the storyteller himself, where he came from, why he does what he does, which I think is
a scold, a bard, I don't know what else they call him. But what is it with Neil Gaiman? I mean, in the last 5 years, did he just get bored? Because he has exploded all over TV and movies. You know, I think the last thing I can remember was Coraline before, then American Gods came out, and Angels and Demons is out, and Lucifer. He just exploded all over television.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, in the Matt Smith era, one of the best episodes, I think, of Doctor Who had to be The Doctor's Wife. Wonderful story. I mean, he's a great writer, definitely. And, yeah, he's definitely been busy in TV and movie, and justifiably so, because he's an amazing writer, and just keep bringing it. Keep bringing it. I'm definitely.
Nothing wrong with it, but for like years there, he was, just books after books and nothing really happening. And then all of a sudden you get Coraline, and a few years later, boom, all over TV.
Right. Now, something else, since we're talking movies, they just lifted the embargo for early reviews for Captain Marvel. And I've been reading those, and I have to say, well, if the reviews are right, I can't wait for this movie.
Excellent.
They have been mostly positive. Even some of the negative things that I've heard have been very minor.
Like nitpicky, kind of.
Nitpicky, but also ready to go back to say, but this is a great film. There was no spoilers in any of the reviews, thank goodness.
Oh, good.
But a lot of things that people have been saying, Goose the cat steals a lot of scenes in this movie.
Never work with children or animals.
Yeah, but also that this movie does feel like a Marvel movie, but it's different as well. They're saying that the 90s nostalgia is on point, and they said that Carol Danvers is an incredible character. All I have to say is, this is one of the few times where DC trumped Marvel because they came out with a female superhero-led movie first. And if I can get one scene as good as the battlefield scene in Wonder Woman, I will be happy.
Okay.
I know that's a tall order, because, oh my goodness, that scene. That scene was incredible. But if I can walk away as happy with Captain Marvel as I did with Wonder Woman, believe me, I've got no complaints there. But yeah, the reviews so far have been really positive and really good, and it's going to be pretty soon. We'll get to see it, and of course, we'll also review it here. We'll definitely talk about it once we've seen it. Speaking of movies, I did, and I won't spend too much time on this because I want to go as spoiler-free as possible on this, but I did get a chance to see Alita Battle Angel. This was a movie that I thought had the potential of being really good, but mostly ignored. It's one. I just felt like this was one of these movies that it was an IP, but it was an anime, and so it might not be something that was really in the consciousness of a lot of American audiences. So I thought that this could be a situation where you have a movie, regardless of how well done it is, it's not going to really, it's going to kind of get overlooked. I'm very happy to find out that wasn't the case at all.
Way to go.
It became the #1 movie its opening weekend, and that was going opposite of the Lego movie sequel's second week.
Oh, okay.
So that was a shock. I thought it would be hard going to go again, because the Lego movie, of course, is a very popular IP, a very popular property that people love, and I thought that
and everyone loves the Lego movie, not just kids.
Exactly.
Adults
and
love
so
the Lego movie.
I was really worried that the movie was going to get overshadowed by that, but it did extremely well, which it makes me really happy for Robert Rodriguez. I've been a fan of his work forever, and lately a lot of his stuff has flown a little more under the radar. But his direction was great. I mean, you're getting a story that James Cameron helped to write. And wow, it delivered on everything. It was a great movie. There's a lot of action in it. It was a lot of beautiful eye candy, definitely, action-wise. But like good science fiction, it talked a lot about what it really means to be human. And I really enjoyed the story. It was a top movie for me. It was fantastic. I'm glad the movie got made. I'm glad I got a chance to see it. And I'm glad that a lot of people are getting a chance to see it. Because, like I said, my biggest concern was people are going to sleep on this. And they didn't. And that makes me happy. So if you haven't seen it yet, obviously my review on this is definitely check it out. And if you get a chance to see it in 3D, check it out in 3D. I mean, normally I'm not the biggest fan of 3D movies live action because of, again, sometimes they tend to get washed out, but it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous in 3D. So you don't have to see it in 3D, but don't be afraid to if you want to. Mm-hmm. So, well, let's close up today. Let's talk about The Walking Dead.
With What the Dead. Yay.
With What the Dead. And there will be spoilers on this one. So if you've not seen it yet, pause the podcast, go watch it, and then come back. The episode was called Omega.
Omega.
And one thing I have to say about this story that really impressed me was I've never seen unreliable narrator handled so well as it was in this episode.
How so?
Well, because you get all of the flashbacks with Lydia. And what's interesting is Lydia is the unreliable narrator. Now, she's not deliberately lying. It's just that Alpha, her mom, lied to her.
Mm-hmm. Has warped her memory and brainwashed her.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there are certain things, even when she still believes stuff, there are indications in the flashback that things aren't exactly correct. Like you get the moment where the dad, he says, the world's gone to hell, I don't care anymore, and he cuts his beard, saying that I only wore this because you liked it, talking to his wife, Alpha. Mm-hmm. And said, I only had this because you liked it, and well, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And so later on in the flashback, he's still got his beard, but Alpha's got her hair cut. It's cut short. And you're like, what's going on here? And it's like, only when you think about it, it's like, no, he never cut his beard. She cut the hair. She was the one who said that. Mm-hmm. And you have the moment where she has the tattoo on her arm, and she's singing to Lydia, Lydia, oh, have you? And she's got Lydia's name tattooed on her arm. And then later on, you don't even notice it, but he's got the tattoo, and he's singing to her. And I mean, there are moments where you think the father died because he got bitten, but you notice that the shot of him dying, there's some marks on the wall, like arches. And then when you actually go into the scene where he gets bitten, there are no marks on the wall. And you're like, what happened? But there's all through this, there's little hints that things aren't exactly the way that Lydia says that they are. And you pick up on them. And even if you don't, you kind of feel, wait a minute, something's wrong here, because why is her hair short now? And why does he have his beard back? He couldn't have grown his beard back that fast. It was all these indications that Lydia is an unreliable narrator. And I've never seen it handled as deftly. I mean, it can be a really powerful mainstay in literature. And there are a lot of places in literature where that's used. But I've never seen it handled as deftly and as well in television. Mm-hmm. In a visual medium as I did in The Walking Dead. I have to say to the screenwriter. I can think
there was one episode of Farscape where they're all on trial and they're all telling the story.
Yes, where they're doing it all from their... Yeah,
right, and they're each one from their own memory and each one perceives it differently. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of great stuff in this episode. I mean, the things between Lydia and Daryl, because, of course, they have that same kind of a back history. They both came from abusive parents. Mm-hmm. And so,
broken homes.
Broken homes and being beaten as a child. And the fact that Daryl was able to kind of zero in on Lydia because he knew what she went through. But at the same time, she was able to zero in on him. She could
see it.
She could see it. She knew, you've had to go through this yourself. Mm-hmm. The stuff with Henry, I thought was amazing. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, a lot of this stuff from the comics was...
With Carl.
Was with Carl. And, of course, we get to the end, and Alpha comes back. Alpha shows up with a bunch of people and, demanding Lydia back, demanding her daughter. A couple things that really stuck out.
Is this a power play, or does she really want her daughter back?
Well, that's a good question. Mm-hmm. The couple things that I noticed about that scene, of course, the first thing was she's still carrying the knife she killed her husband with. She's like... She still has it on her belt. It's like it's...
that's her Lucille.
That's her... That very much, that may be her Lucille. Now, of course, a lot of people have been comparing Alpha to Carol. And I had never thought of that before, but that's a really... Because I'm just thinking, if Henry was being held captive by Hilltop and we thought they were the villains, what would Carol do to them?
Burn it down. Hilltop would be in cinders.
Yeah. So, and Alpha is more than capable because, and I don't think this is much of a spoiler to say this, but although she came with force, she didn't come with all her force. She has a heck of a lot more, but that's the thing. She walked up to that front gate like she wasn't scared of nothing. Mm-hmm. And I know that in the comics, of course, the interactions for the most part at Hilltop were between Alpha and Maggie. And of course, Maggie's not there now.
Right.
And so Daryl's taking over. So now we have this situation where I guess Daryl's going to step up and do the negotiation. Well, I don't know how much of a negotiation there's going to be. You know, Alpha is demanding Lydia back. And I mean, on a very strategic level, that sounds like that's a good idea because for all we know, she may still have Enid's boyfriend and the band teacher alive. Mm-hmm. And there may be she might be thinking of offering that as a trade-off. But the thing about it is, although it was good, I think, for Daryl and Lydia to find out about each other, I think that strategically, even though it may be a good idea to turn Lydia over and do the trade, I don't think Daryl's going to. I think that to him, it's going to be too much of a moral imperative to not do it. And I think that is going to, and it's no thinking about it, it's definitely going to cause problems.
So do you feel like Henry is going to release Lydia?
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
Of course he let her out during the episode to walk around a little bit. And of course they shared a worm together. Oh, how romantic. But keeping her locked up might be for her safety. I don't know if they're going to, like I said, I don't know how the show next week is going to end. Mm-hmm. But certainly there's going to be tensions between the Whisperers and Hilltop because of the situation with Lydia. And now whether the one thing about Alpha, I mean, for all Lydia had to say about how she doesn't care, they lose somebody, they move on. She didn't do that. So for whatever reason, she wants Lydia back. She has no intention of leaving without Lydia. So whether that's done out of a love for Lydia or it's a pride thing, we don't know. But the thing about it is, Alpha's going to be bumping heads with Daryl on this, and it's going to come down to some sort of violence, I think. But, of course, this week we've got a new episode, and I guess we'll find out what happens.
See.
So we'll definitely be talking about that next week. And so with that said, we come to the end of episode 57 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.